The alien market was loud and crowded, a maze of broken stalls and shouting voices. The smell of burnt metal, stale food, and sweat filled the dusty air. Everyone moved fast here, buying, selling, stealing, just to survive another day. Daniel tightened his grip on his worn satchel as he moved through the crowd. He was the only human in sight. Tall, rough-looking alien traders shouted at each other in languages Daniel didn't understand. Small, skinny kids darted between the legs of shoppers, snatching whatever they could. Daniel knew he had to stay alert. In this part of the city, kindness was rare and weakness was a death sentence. He stopped at a stall selling water filters, his eyes scanning the old, battered machines. Maybe one still worked. As he reached out to examine a small unit, he felt there was a soft tug at his side. In one quick motion, he spun around. He caught a glimpse of a tiny figure, a child, thin and fast, clutching something stolen from his satchel. The boy's skin was a pale shade of blue, marked with small white spots across his arms and cheeks. His clothes were torn and dirty. His eyes, wide with fear, locked onto Daniel for just a second before he turned and bolted into the crowd. Daniel's first instinct was anger. It had taken him days to gather what little supplies he had. Losing even a single item could mean starving tomorrow. But then he saw something else in the boy's desperate eyes. Not greed, not mischief. Hunger. Real, deep hunger. The kind that made you do anything just to survive. Without thinking, Daniel took off after him. The boy weaved through the crowded market like a ghost, slipping through gaps too small for grown men. Daniel pushed through, ignoring the shouts and curses of angry traders. The chase led him away from the busy stalls, deeper into the ruins, broken buildings, cracked roads, places most people didn't dare go. The city changed here. It wasn't alive anymore. It was dead and crumbling, forgotten by those in power. Daniel slowed down, careful now. The boy had disappeared into the shadows of a collapsed warehouse. Daniel approached quietly, his boots crunching broken glass underfoot. He found a gap between two fallen walls and slipped through. Inside, the air was cool and smelled of mold and old metal. It was silent except for a faint, broken cough. Daniel followed the sound. In a corner of the ruined building, he found them. The boy knelt beside a figure lying on a dirty mat. A woman, older, her skin the same pale blue as the boy's. She was shaking, her arms wrapped tightly around her thin body. Her eyes were closed. Her face was soaked in sweat. The stolen food, a small pack of dried rations, sat unopened beside her. The boy hadn't stolen for himself. He had stolen for her. Daniel felt something heavy settle in his chest. This wasn't crime. This wasn't trickery. This was survival. The boy looked up, panic flashing in his wide eyes as he saw Daniel standing there. He moved quickly, shielding the woman with his small body, arms spread wide as if daring Daniel to come closer. Daniel raised both hands, palms open, showing he meant no harm. "It's okay," he said softly. "I'm not here to hurt you." The boy didn't move, didn't trust. Daniel understood. In a world like this, trust was more dangerous than hunger. Slowly, carefully, Daniel knelt down, keeping his hands where the boy could see them. He glanced at the woman. Her breathing was shallow, ragged. Her skin had a sickly gray tint. She needed help. Real help, and soon. Daniel reached into his satchel and pulled out a small water pouch. He tossed it gently toward the boy, who flinched but caught it. The boy hesitated for a moment, then twisted the cap open and poured a few drops into the woman's cracked lips. She swallowed weakly. The boy looked up at Daniel again, confusion and fear battling inside him. Daniel offered a tired smile. "She needs more than food," he said. "She needs medicine, rest, shelter." The boy blinked slowly. He didn't speak. Maybe he didn't know how. Maybe he didn't trust himself to believe. Daniel didn't expect him to. He knew trust wasn't something you asked for. It was something you earned. And looking at the boy's thin arms and haunted eyes, Daniel made a decision. He wasn't leaving. Not without helping. Not in a world where too many already looked the other way. He shifted his weight, making himself comfortable on the dirty floor. "I'll stay," he said simply, "until she's better." The boy stared at him, frozen in shock. Daniel leaned his head back against the cracked wall and closed his eyes for a moment. Outside, the dead city howled with empty wind. But inside this broken shelter, something small and fragile had started to bloom. Hope. Maybe the first in a very long time. The shelter was dark and broken, barely keeping out the cold winds that howled through the dead city. Daniel sat quietly against the crumbling wall, watching the little alien boy. The boy fed his sick mother tiny sips of water, his small hand shaking with every movement. She coughed weakly, her body trembling harder with each breath. Daniel's heart twisted painfully at the sight. This wasn't just sickness. It was starvation, neglect, maybe even something worse. He had seen it before, on the outer colonies, on abandoned space stations, places where the forgotten lived and died unseen. And now, right here, it was happening again. Daniel moved, slowly, pulling a small heating pad from his satchel, one of his last working supplies. He pressed the pad against the woman's side, wrapping her in the thin, dirty blanket. The boy watched him with cautious eyes, ready to grab his mother and run if Daniel made a wrong move. Daniel kept his voice low and steady. "I'm not your enemy," he said. "I'm just trying to help." The boy didn't answer, but he didn't run either. That was something. Hours passed. Daniel tried everything he could. He rubbed the woman's cold hands between his palms, trying to bring warmth back. He mixed crushed water purifiers into the last of his clean supply, making it safer for her to drink. He gently cleaned the cracked skin around her mouth with pieces of his own shirt. The little boy helped where he could, though he was too small, too weak himself. Together they fought against the slow pull of death that filled the shelter like a rising tide. As the day wore on, Daniel knew they couldn't stay here. The shelter was too open, too exposed. Hunters prowled these ruins at night, scavengers, slavers worse. If they stayed, they'd all be easy prey. They had to move, but the woman could barely lift her head. Daniel looked at her frail form and felt a cold knot form in his gut. He couldn't carry her far, not alone. But he couldn't leave her behind either. He made his decision. Slowly, carefully, he fashioned a rough stretcher from broken pipes and torn cloth he found in the shelter. It wasn't much, wobbly, rough, but it would hold her weight if he was careful. The boy watched him work, wide-eyed. When Daniel finished, he knelt in front of the boy. "We have to move," he said gently. "It's not safe here." The boy looked, back at his mother, then at Daniel. Fear battled with trust in his small face. Finally, he gave a tiny nod. A brave nod. Daniel smiled, though his heart felt heavy. "Good," he said softly. "Stay close to me. Don't let go." Lifting the woman onto the stretcher was harder than Daniel expected. She was lighter than a bundle of sticks, but every shift made her whimper weakly. Daniel gritted his teeth, trying not to cause more pain. When she was settled, he tied the makeshift handles around his shoulders. It wasn't comfortable, it wasn't easy, but it would work. It had to. They slipped out of the ruined warehouse just as the sky darkened into a bruised purple. The streets were almost empty now, but danger still lurked in every shadow. Daniel moved quickly, pulling the stretcher behind him, the boy trotting close to his side. They moved through old back alleys away from the main roads where gangs and patrols roamed. Every few steps, Daniel checked over his shoulder. Every strange sound made him tighten his grip on the stretcher. He could feel how fragile their hope was. One wrong turn, one bad encounter, and it would all be over. At one point, a pack of feral scavenger beasts crossed their path. Lean, four-legged creatures with glowing eyes and sharp teeth. Daniel froze, motioning the boy to stay silent. The beasts sniffed, the air growling low in their throats. Daniel grabbed a broken metal pipe from the street and banged it against a wall, shouting loudly. The beasts flinched at the noise and slunk away into the ruins. Daniel let out a shaky breath and motioned, the boy forward, still alive, still moving, but the danger was growing. Finally, after what felt like endless hours, Daniel spotted it, an old, half-collapsed train station buried under rubble. It wasn't much, but it had thick walls. It had hiding spots. It was better than open streets. With the last of his strength, Daniel dragged the stretcher inside. The boy helped him find a dry corner. They laid the woman down gently. Her breathing was still weak, but she was alive. Alive, for now. Daniel sat down hard against the wall, sweat dripping from his face despite the cold. The boy sat beside his mother, watching Daniel with new eyes. Not just fear, not just suspicion, something else. Something like hope. Daniel smiled tiredly. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't a medic. He was just a stubborn human who refused to let another innocent life slip away. And for now, in this tiny, broken corner of a dead world, that was enough. Tomorrow would bring new dangers, new battles. But tonight, they had won a small, precious victory. They had survived. Together, the broken train station was cold and silent, sheltering them from the dangers outside but offering little comfort. Daniel sat beside the alien woman, watching every slow rise and fall of her chest. Each breath was a battle, each heartbeat a fragile victory. The little boy sat close to his mother, holding her trembling hand between his tiny fingers. He said nothing. He didn't cry anymore. He simply watched her, as if willing her to stay alive through pure force of love. Daniel understood that look all too well. He had worn it himself once, long ago, when he sat beside his dying brother, on the colony fields of Earth. He knew how heavy hope could become when it was the only thing left to carry. Hours passed. Daniel worked in silence. He crushed the last of his fever tablets and mixed them carefully into the purified water. He dripped it slowly between the woman's cracked lips, one drop at a time. He wrapped her in the cleanest cloth he could find, tucking it tight to trap what little warmth remained. He massaged her hands and feet gently, forcing blood through her weak limbs. The little boy helped where he could, holding the cloths, fetching broken tools, his small face serious and brave. Daniel didn't know the boy's name. He didn't know the woman's name. It didn't matter. Names didn't save lives. Actions did. At one point, the woman stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, clouded with pain and confusion. Her mouth moved soundlessly, trying to form words that wouldn't come. Daniel leaned closer, catching only broken fragments of alien speech he didn't understand. But he understood the meaning well enough. Fear, gratitude, desperation. The little boy squeezed her hand tightly, whispering something soft and urgent in their native language. Tears welled in her dim eyes, slipping silently down her sunken cheeks. Daniel felt his throat tighten painfully. He had seen too much death to mistake what he was witnessing now. She was fighting with everything she had left. But the sickness was pulling at her heavy and cruel. If they didn't find real medicine soon, if they didn't get her somewhere safer, she wouldn't last another night. Daniel stood up and walked to the broken entrance of the station. He looked out at the ruined city beyond, a wasteland of ash, twisted metal, and broken dreams. Somewhere out there, supplies still existed. Somewhere out there, someone must have stored medkits, boosters, anything that could help. But getting them meant leaving the boy and his mother alone, even for a few hours. He clenched his fists. It was a terrible choice. Stay and watch her fade away, or go, and risk coming back too late. He turned back to the small shelter where the boy sat, guarding his mother like a tiny soldier. Daniel made his decision. He knelt beside the boy, speaking slowly and clearly. "I have to go," he said, "to find medicine." The boy's eyes widened in fear. He shook his head violently, grabbing Daniel's sleeve. "Stay," he whispered, voice cracking. Daniel placed his rough hand gently on the boy's shoulder. "I'll come back," he promised. "I swear." The boy bit his lip, fighting the urge to cry. Finally, slowly, he let go. Daniel smiled, though his heart ached. "Take care of her," he said. The boy nodded fiercely, wiping his nose on his sleeve. Before Daniel left, he pulled his last energy bar from his satchel and handed it to the boy. "Share it with her," he said. The boy clutched it tightly as if it were the most precious thing in the world. Daniel looked one last time at the woman, at the mother fighting so silently, so desperately, and then he slipped into the ruins. The city swallowed him whole. Every step away from the station felt like betrayal. Every noise in the dark twisted his gut with fear. But he kept moving, because survival wasn't about comfort. It wasn't about safety. It was about stubbornness, about refusing to let the darkness win. And Daniel had been stubborn all his life. As he moved through the dead streets, memories of Earth flickered in his mind. Memories of other mothers, other children, other hopeless places where life had fought tooth and nail to survive. He had seen what giving up looked like. He had sworn never to become it. Not while breath still filled his lungs. Back at the station, the little boy sat beside his mother, whispering softly to her. He held the energy bar tightly but didn't eat it. Not yet. He was saving it for when she woke up. Because in his small, fierce heart, he believed what the human had promised. Daniel would come back. He would bring hope with him. He would not abandon them. Not like the others. Not like the world. And in that broken station, among the ruins and the cold, a fragile light flickered. A mother's silent struggle continued. A child's hope burned bright. And far across the dead city, a human fought against impossible odds. Because sometimes, hope needed a sword, and sometimes, it needed only a stubborn heart that refused to stop. The ruined city swallowed Daniel as he moved through the broken streets. The wind howled between shattered buildings, carrying the bitter smell of smoke and dust. Every shadow felt alive. Every noise made his heart pound faster. But he didn't stop. He couldn't. Somewhere behind him, in the broken train station, a child waited. A sick mother fought to hold on to life, and Daniel had made a promise. Hours slipped by. Daniel searched every wrecked store, every fallen shelter, every abandoned med bay he could find. Most places had already been picked clean. Sometimes he found only bones, sometimes just silence. But he kept going, driven by something deeper than fear. Finally, in the ruins of an old emergency outpost, he found it. A small, dusty medical box, cracked, but still sealed. Inside were a few precious supplies: fever, medicine, a portable IV unit, a booster shot that could strengthen a failing heart. It wasn't much, but it was hope. And in this dead city, hope was the rarest thing of all. Daniel wasted no time. He sprinted back toward the station, dodging broken walls and fallen debris. The sky had turned darker now, heavy clouds gathering for another acid rainstorm. He ran faster. Every second counted. Every second could mean the difference between life and death. When he finally reached the station, he was out of breath, soaked in sweat. But he didn't care. He slipped through the broken entrance, heart hammering in his chest. The shelter was silent. Too silent. Panic clawed at him. "Kid," he called softly. "I'm back." For a long, terrifying moment, there was no answer. Then, a soft, weak cough. Daniel turned and saw them, still curled in the far corner, under the thin blanket. The little boy sat alert, his tiny body tense. When he saw Daniel, he froze. His small hands tightened around the energy bar Daniel had given him. For a moment, Daniel saw the fear in his eyes, the same fear he had seen everywhere, the fear that everyone leaves eventually. But then slowly the boy's face changed. The fear cracked, and in its place, something new bloomed. Trust. The boy scrambled to his feet and rushed forward, clutching Daniel's jacket tightly. Daniel knelt down, resting a hand on the boy's shoulder. "I told you I'd come back," he said. his voice rough with emotion. The boy said nothing. He didn't need to. His small arms wrapped tightly around Daniel's neck, and for a moment, the cold, broken world outside didn't matter. Here, in this forgotten place, trust had been won, not with promises, but with action. Daniel pulled away gently and showed the boy the medical kit. "Let's help her," he said. Together they moved back to the mother's side. Daniel worked fast but carefully. He set up the IV unit, sliding the needle into her thin arm. He crushed the fever medicine and fed it to her drop by drop. He injected the booster into her heart muscle, praying it would be enough. The boy watched every move with wide, serious eyes. He didn't speak, but he never looked away. Time stretched. The woman's breathing was shallow. Her body was still. Daniel pressed his fingers to her neck, feeling for the faint beat of life. It was there, thin, fluttering, but there. "Come on," Daniel whispered. "Fight." The boy clutched his mother's other hand, squeezing it tightly. Minutes felt like hours. Then, slowly, painfully, the woman stirred. Her fingers twitched weakly. Her lips moved in a soft, broken whisper. The boy gasped, tears filling his eyes. Daniel smiled, feeling a huge wave of relief crash through him. She wasn't healed yet, but she was fighting, and sometimes fighting was enough. The rain began outside, tapping softly against the ruins. Inside, the small, broken station felt warmer somehow. Safer, not because the danger was gone, but because they weren't facing it alone anymore. That night, Daniel sat beside the boy, sharing the last of his dried food. The boy nibbled carefully, never straying far. From his mother's side, he didn't speak much, but once as he finished a bite, he looked up at Daniel and said a single word in halting human tongue. "Family." Daniel blinked, feeling a lump rise in his throat. He smiled, ruffling the boy's dusty hair. "Yeah," he said softly. "Family. Not by blood, not by race, but by choice, by the battles fought together, by the promises kept in the darkest places." Outside, the dead city slept uneasily under the falling rain. Inside the broken station, a human, an alien boy, and a struggling mother held onto the fragile light of trust, a small flame burning stubbornly against the endless dark. Tomorrow would bring new threats, new struggles. But tonight, they had each other, and in a world where trust was more precious than gold, that was everything. The rain fell harder, drumming against the cracked roof of the broken train station. Inside, Daniel stayed awake, sitting near the entrance, his hand gripping a broken metal pipe like a weapon. The boy and his mother slept close together, wrapped in the thin blanket. Daniel's eyes never closed. Something in the air had changed. The city had always been dangerous, but tonight it felt worse, heavier, like a storm building that had nothing to do with the weather. He trusted his instincts, and his instincts told him something bad was coming. Just before dawn, he heard it. Soft footsteps in the puddles outside. Not scavenger beasts, not normal survivors. No, these steps were too heavy, too careful. Hunters. Real hunters. Daniel's grip on the pipe tightened. He moved quickly, checking the small hiding spots he had set up. Broken crates, collapsed beams, old metal walls. Anything to create cover. He gently woke the boy, pressing a finger to his lips. The boy blinked sleepily, then nodded, understanding at once. He slipped to his mother's side, hiding under the rubble as Daniel had shown him. Daniel crouched near the doorway, waiting, listening, breathing slow and deep. Voices drifted through the rain, low, rough, laughing. Daniel caught fragments of their words. Easy picking. One human, couple of sick ones. Sell them before sunrise. His jaw clenched. They weren't just scavengers. They were slave hunters, monsters who took the weak, the sick, the young, and sold them like goods. And They thought Daniel would be easy prey. They had no idea what kind of fight they had walked into. He waited until the first hunter stepped inside, a thick, heavily armed alien with a cruel scar across his face. Without hesitation, Daniel moved. Fast. Silent. He swung the pipe low, smashing into the hunter's knee with a sickening crack. The hunter howled in pain, falling hard onto the ground. Before he could shout a warning, Daniel slammed the pipe against his helmet, knocking him out cold. The noise brought the others running. 3 more figures rushed toward the station. Daniel gritted his teeth. He wasn't a soldier, he wasn't a killer, but he was a human. And humans had always been dangerous when protecting their own. The second hunter came in swinging a shock baton. Daniel ducked the first blow, feeling the air crackle above his head. He drove his shoulder into the man's chest, knocking him off balance. The third hunter fired a stun blast that missed by inches, hitting the wall and sending sparks flying. The boy whimpered softly from his hiding spot, but stayed hidden, just like Daniel had told him. Good. Smart kid. Daniel grabbed a broken metal rod from the floor and threw it like a spear. It hit the third hunter's hand, knocking the stun gun flying across the station. The second hunter charged again, but Daniel sidestepped and tripped him, sending him crashing into a pile of debris. The third tried to run for the gun. Daniel tackled him from behind, dragging him down into the mud and rain. Fists swung. Boots kicked. But Daniel didn't stop. Didn't slow. Every punch he threw was powered by something more than anger. It was powered by the promise he had made, to protect, to fight, to never leave them behind. Finally, bloodied and gasping for air, Daniel stood alone. The hunters lay unconscious or crawling away into the ruins, defeated. For now. He stumbled back inside the station. The boy ran to him, his face full of fear and awe. Daniel knelt down, ruffling the boy's hair with a shaky hand. "It's okay," he said, voice rough. "They're gone." The boy nodded, tears shining in his wide eyes. Together, they went back to the mother's side. She slept on, unaware of the danger that had come so close. Unaware that a battle had been fought in the dark just to buy her another sunrise. Daniel sat down heavily beside them, every muscle aching. He leaned his head back against the cold wall and closed his eyes for just a moment. He wasn't stupid. He knew more hunters would come, more dangers, more storms. But he also knew something else. He wasn't fighting alone anymore, not really. He had them, the boy, the mother, and maybe soon others too. People who still believed that survival wasn't just about hiding. It was about standing up. Fighting back, protecting what mattered. Outside, the rain began to slow. A faint light touched the edge of the broken world. Another day had come, and Daniel was still standing. Still fighting. Still keeping the fragile hope alive, against hunger, against fear, against the darkness itself. Because that's what it meant to be human. And he wouldn't stop now. Not ever. The rain had finally stopped. The city lay under a heavy mist, broken and silent. Daniel sat by the entrance of the ruined station, a cracked piece of metal pipe still resting across his knees. His body ached from the fight. Bruises were blooming under his clothes and every breath hurt, but he stayed alert. He knew the hunters would come again. This time smarter, stronger, more careful. They had tasted defeat, and men like them never forgot a wound to their pride. He looked back inside at the little boy and his sick mother. The boy slept lightly, curled protectively beside her. The woman's breathing was steadier now thanks to the booster and clean water Daniel had given her, but they were still too weak to run, which meant only one thing. They had to defend this broken shelter. Here. Now. Alone. Daniel set to work. He wasn't a soldier, but he knew how to survive. He had learned it the hard way, growing up on the rough streets of the colonies where every day was a new fight. He scavenged the station for anything useful. Old metal, beams to block the entrances, broken seats to make barriers, loose wiring to create simple trip traps across the halls. He rigged old batteries into crude shock traps. Not enough to kill, but enough to stun or slow. It wasn't much. But sometimes survival didn't need perfect plans. It needed stubbornness, and Daniel had plenty of that. By the time he finished, the sky was turning dark again. The mist thickened, swallowing the ruins, and with it came the first signs of movement. Shadows flickered at the edges of the broken road. Muffled voices. The low hum of energy weapons charging. They were here. Daniel tightened the straps on his jacket, wiped sweat from his forehead, and took a deep breath. He didn't pray. He didn't beg. He simply prepared himself to stand. Not because he thought he would win, but because he had made a promise. Because sometimes, standing meant more than surviving. It meant protecting something worth fighting for. The first hunter stepped through the mist, a tall, armored figure with sharp eyes and cruel hands. He spotted the barriers Daniel had built and laughed. A short, ugly sound. Daniel stayed hidden behind the broken ticket booth waiting. The hunter moved forward. His foot hit a thin tripwire. Snap! The battery trap exploded with a sharp crack, sending a jolt through the hunter's body. He fell with a grunt, stunned. Before he could rise, Daniel was there, swinging the metal pipe with all his strength. One down. More coming. Two more hunters rushed the entrance, shouting. Daniel ducked behind the barriers, drawing them closer. He led them through the traps. One got tangled in wire, the other slipped on soaked tiles, crashing into a wall. Daniel fought like a man possessed. Every swing of his pipe was wild but desperate. Every step he took was toward keeping them away from the ones he had sworn to protect. Blood ran from a cut over his eye. His muscles screamed. But he didn't back down. Not once. In the middle of the chaos, Daniel saw the little boy peeking out from behind the rubble. Terror flashed in his eyes. But also something else. Pride. Hope. Daniel shouted without looking back. "Stay down! Stay hidden!" The boy ducked back obediently, clutching his mother's hand tightly. The fight dragged on. One hunter managed to shoot Daniel in the side with a stun blast. Burning pain ripped through his ribs, dropping him to one knee. The second hunter raised, his weapon, aiming for the kill. Daniel forced himself to move. He threw a broken piece of metal, not aiming, just trusting, and it struck the hunter's hand. The shot went wild, hitting the ceiling instead. Debris rained down, separating Daniel from the attackers. It gave him a few precious seconds he used to pull himself up again. Finally, after what felt like a lifetime, the surviving hunters realized it wasn't worth it. Not tonight. Not against one stubborn, half-dead human who refused to fall. They retreated into the mist, dragging their wounded with them. The ruined station fell, silent once more. Broken, burned, but still standing, just like Daniel. He stumbled back inside, every step a battle. The boy rushed to him, wrapping small arms around his waist, helping him stay upright. Daniel knelt beside the woman. She was still, breathing, still fighting. He smiled through the pain. "We're still here," he whispered. The boy nodded fiercely. Together, they had survived another night. Daniel leaned back against the wall, closing his eyes briefly. He knew more battles would come, more enemies, more storms. But he also knew something else. They weren't just surviving anymore. They were living. Fighting for something real. Something worth every bruise, every scar, every drop of blood. Because when a human stood, truly stood, against fear and death, they became unstoppable. And, Daniel, he was just getting started. The city was still broken. The ruins stretched as far as the eye could see, empty shells of a life that once was. But inside the old train station, something new had begun. Something stronger than steel. Something more precious than gold. Family. Daniel woke to the soft light of morning slipping through the shattered roof. Pain ached through every bone in his body. His side burned where the stun blast had hit. But when he opened his eyes and saw them, the little boy curled close, the mother resting more peacefully than before. He smiled. The boy was awake too, sitting quietly beside his mother, holding her hand. When he noticed Daniel watching, he gave a shy, proud smile. Daniel sat up slowly, grimacing against the soreness. "You did good," he said in a rough voice. The boy's smile widened. It was a small thing, but in a world filled with loss and fear, it meant everything. The mother stirred. Her eyes fluttered open. For a long moment, confusion clouded her face. Then she saw her son, saw Daniel, and in that broken, battered place she smiled. It was faint, it was weak, but it was real. Tears slipped down her cheeks, not from pain, but from something deeper: relief, gratitude, hope. Daniel moved closer. "You're safe," he said softly. "You're safe now." She didn't understand the words, but she understood the feeling. Some languages didn't need translation. Later that day, Daniel helped the mother drink water properly for the first time in days. He shared the last of his food with them. He patched the broken roof as best he could using torn cloth and old scrap. It wasn't much, but it was home. For now. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the ruins, Daniel sat outside the station, sharpening a piece of metal into a rough blade. The boy sat beside him, mimicking his movements with a broken stick. Daniel smiled at the sight. He realized something then, something that filled him with a warmth he hadn't felt in years. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was building something. A life, a family, a future. The mother was stronger by evening, still weak, still needing time to heal, but her eyes were clearer, her hands steadier. Daniel helped her sit up against the wall. He wrapped her in the blanket, careful not to hurt her. The boy sat proudly beside her, holding her hand tightly. She looked at Daniel and spoke, soft, musical words in her alien tongue. He didn't understand, but he understood enough. "Thank you." As the stars blinked into the dark sky, Daniel built a small fire from broken wood and old paper. They sat together around it, the human, the alien mother, the brave little boy. They shared dried fruit and clean water. They shared smiles. They shared silence. The boy leaned his head against Daniel's arm, yawning sleepily. Daniel ruffled his hair gently. "You're safe," he whispered again. "Not just from the hunters, not just from the sickness, but from the loneliness that had ruled the ruins for too long." They were a family now, not by blood, not by race, but by choice, by fights shared, by promises kept, by hope born in the darkest places. Daniel knew life wouldn't be easy. There would be more dangers, more nights like the one they had just survived. But he also knew something else. They would face it together, and that made all the difference. In the ruins of a broken world, where others had turned away, a stubborn human had stayed, had fought, had protected, and in doing so he had built something far greater than survival. He had built a future. Far above them, among the stars, ships still flew. Wars still raged. Empires still rose and fell. But here, in the ashes of a forgotten city, something far more powerful had been born. A bond, a fire, a family, and it would burn brighter than any star.